Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live streaming for October 29th, 2017. I'm Tina Spalding. Of course, this is Kenneth Berenson, my co-host. How do I turn my email notification noise off?
Do you want me to answer you?
It's okay. That's what that dinging is. We'll do it afterwards.
Okay. We don't hear anything.
Oh, you don't hear anything?
It's just in your head.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't hear anything actually.
We don't. Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. It's all in my head. Yes, it is. I was just sharing with Kenneth. I went out for an early breakfast this morning and had a little eavesdrop on the table behind me, and it was a father with his two children. And all I heard him say was, show me how much you love me by eating this food. And I just thought, oh my goodness, that's how we get in trouble with food as kids. Our parents bribing or cajoling or doing something like that. Anyway, it was just one of those moments where I thought, oh, there's an eating disorder in the making there. Just a thought.
I have to add to that though, because
yes.
I'm at my parents' place, and I've so understood where my chocolate addiction comes from, because it's so much cakes, and it's almost like I've been with them now for maybe 3-4 days or something straight. So it's like every single almost second it feels like there's some kind of food thing happening. There's either, oh, you want some coffee or cake, or continuously throughout the day. It's insane. It's insane.
And it's making me insane.
Yeah, and I'm just observing it to kind of like, okay, this is in here, this is in here.
That's what I do when I'm around my mum. I just say, this is the person who trained you, Tina. And I can do it now without judgment, without any kind of acrimony. But I'm like, oh, this is the person who trained you. Pay attention. Just pay attention. And it really is with love. Now I just know that conditioning process has been deeply ingrained in me. So it takes some time for all of us to get out of these deeply ingrained programs. And I have to be honest, over the last couple of months, I have been so grateful for A Course in Miracles, just to give me the toolkit to be able to negotiate my way through fear or resentment or feeling lost. It's just been quite an intense little while. And the interesting thing is, nothing bad is happening. These are just my ideas being revealed to me, and it's my ideas about things that are causing me any difficulty whatsoever. And I know that all of you that are in your, second or third year of the course, or obviously some of you have been doing it longer, you see this so clearly that our suffering is just self-induced. So for those of you that are suffering a lot, please practice the lessons of A Course in Miracles, or do them to start with. I know some people have tremendous resistance to doing them. I had a session with someone just last week who may be listening today, and as diligent as they've been joining us on the live streaming, they haven't done the lessons, and they're suffering tremendously for that. And so, of course, my encouragement during that session was, try the lessons and see what happens. We've all tried living by what our parents taught us and what our society taught us, and a lot of us suffer. So, try the lessons, give it a shot, and see if you see a difference. And that was all I did. I did the lessons, and I saw such a difference in my experience that I kept going and I kept practicing, and the peace and the ability to manage life got better and better. And that's why I do this work, is because I know it works. And we're not perfect. We fall, we make crazy decisions based on what we believe about reality, and that continues on. I still am experiencing aspects of my mind that are not loving, But I know from my practice that I can work through it, and I can forgive, and I can come to peace again. So that's my little. So, okay, let's get to these interesting questions. I hear we have some interesting questions.
All right, straight on to the questions.
Yeah, I don't know why, but let's do that.
Let's do it. Yeah. Okay, so the first one. Dear Nanda and Jesus, you said that our incarnations are like tentacles of an octopus. If one tentacle becomes enlightened, does it mean that the rest of the tentacles or oversoul also become enlightened or awaken? Thanks, Boone.
Ah, good question, Boone.
Yeah, awesome start.
Yeah, let's see what Jesus has to say. This is a sacred gathering. I am that one that you know as Jesus, and that is the thought that I want to plant into your minds now. That when you are gathered with other beings that are seeking awakening, it is a very, very sacred time, because you are all tuning in together to achieve the same goal. And that is an exponential equation. When you are by yourself, you are left with your own madness. You are self-reflecting all the time, trying to make sense out of a senseless situation using the dysfunctional mind that created the situation. And you can see how this is very frustrating. And that is what makes you tired. That is what makes you sick. That is what causes you to leave relationships, because you cannot figure out how to heal it with your own dysfunctional mind. But once you start gathering with other beings and you hear a sane voice at times outside of you, that is when you begin to question the beliefs you hold in your mind. For that is what all of you must become willing to do. You must all become willing to question your thoughts, because your thoughts are coming from your beliefs. And your beliefs are not yours. They are not true a lot of the time. So it generates a thought that generates an unpleasant feeling, but you believe the thought, and so you embody the feeling. Now, reincarnation is a body-focused philosophy. So if you imagine bodies being reincarnated, then things get tricky, because there is no time and there is no linear arrangement of incarnations as you tell this story in your society. So awakening comes to the mind, not the body. And when you are believing in separation, you are deluded. So if you think of each incarnation as different manifestations of the deluded mind, then that aspect of the oversoul temporarily believes in separation. Now, the oversoul knows better. It is guardian of all of these aspects, going out into a temporary physical manifestation to experience different things, different beliefs, different idols, different illusory ideas. So, of course, in the Course in Miracles, it said there was a mad idea, and this is really the hardest part for humans in the level of consciousness that they have to comprehend what happened to you. You believed some part of a greater self wanted to have an experience of separation, but did not really comprehend what was going to happen. And that is the truth of the matter. So as the consciousness that you understand to be Jesus, have come back into a focal point to communicate with you, but in my real existence, I am part of the whole, and I am aware of that truth. when I come back into this focused consciousness to communicate with you from that place of that past incarnation, so you can imagine a great gathering of, you have in your cartoons thought bubbles, the little bubble that comes out of the head. Imagine each life that has been lived in a thought bubble, a completely self-contained, unique experience, but it is within the whole. So when a communication like this happens, that thought bubble, if you will, focuses itself down to communicate with beings that do not understand how reality works. So we use words through a human because you understand this method of communication. We can download this information directly into your consciousness, but most of you are so busy out there believing and chasing in what you believe that those kinds of pieces of information will be dismissed. So we have created for you a way that you can begin to learn how to get direct information. So those of you that are learning to channel because of the connections through this group are now not as reliant on this form of communication. You are beginning to directly connect to your own guides and teachers, some of whom you know already. In terms of incarnation, the physical incarnation from Spirit's point of view is not really real. It is very dreamlike. So just as if you win $1 million in your dream time at night, that does not mean that you wake up and have $1 million. So the awakening process is really a remembering process. It's a remembering what you truly are, which is one with everything, a divine aspect of God mind, a thought in the mind of God, however you want to word it. When you become truly awakened, now that is enlightenment, when there is nothing left in your mind but the knowledge, the truth, the expression of love. That is what enlightenment is. Then there is no need to come back into this seeming reality. You return to the truth. But as long as you are seeking, as long as you are believing, as long as you are forgetting, then you are stuck in time. But time is not real. You can release yourself from time. So it is very much like thought bubbles going back up into the inclusive whole. We use images and ideas to try and explain to you something that is incomprehensible given the state of your consciousness. Some of you will have had an experience of oneness. You will have had a moment of revelation where you knew everything and you were connected to everything. And there is no way that there are words to explain that experience. That is, for a moment, you were given the experience of truth to encourage you to let go of the beliefs and ideas in your mind that you still hold valuable. So this is the journey that you are all on. You are experiencing things that you refuse to let go of over and over and over again. Unloving thoughts and ideas over and over and over again. Why? Because you have the ability to create whatever it is that you wish over and over and over again. It is in allowing yourself to be taught about something new that is old, because this is the truth of the matter. Everything that you return to is eternal, has always been, will always be. It is your temporary separation, belief in separation from that reality, that makes an incarnation for you. But deep in your mind have been planted untrue ideas. And because you are incredibly powerful creators, because you can manifest whatever it is that you hold on to, believe in, want, you get further and further and further away from truth. And that is why this society is so troubled, because imagine back 200 or 300 years in simpler times when there was not this incredible urbanization and technology and industrialization. You would have had a closer relationship to the land. You would have had a closer relationship to the natural cycles. You would have had closer relationships to family members and friends. You would not have had this relentless traveling and migrating that you do on the planet. And this does contribute to a lot of loneliness for a lot of you. You are seduced by the marketing of these plane tickets and holidays, but you cannot find what it is that you are looking for in that journey. It is an interior journey that must be taken. And 200 or 300 years ago, it was easier for beings to learn about themselves in a less stressful way. And there was a spiritual nature, even though some beings would have been involved in the church, which was not necessarily a loving entity. They still understood the concept of forgiveness. They understood the concept of prayer. They understood the concept of meditation from a very early age. They understood that you needed to spend some time contemplating the divine on a Sunday. And even if they only gave up a day to that, they still really believed that there was some divine connection that could help them, that was connected to them. Indigenous societies had a different kind of connection to the divine, but it was just as valid and it was just as present. But what's happened to you over these last few generations is the secularization of your mind, which makes that separation from the divine feel even more real. And so that is the work that we are about with all of you, is getting you to once again focus inside, once again connect with nature, once again look at how natural or unnatural your food consumption is, because these are all contributing factors to your connection to what is, rather than what is manufactured. And that is what the modern mind is suffering from. It is suffering from an identification with a manufactured world rather than seeking to connect with home, the truth, divine love. So folks a few hundred years ago were not perfect by any means. They were still experiencing separation and a belief in a physical reality that kept them in some degree of suffering. It is the nature of this state of consciousness rather than this world, physical world. We will say it is the nature of a certain state of consciousness that is believing in separation, believing in attack, believing in a judgment, empowering fear, and thus creating sickness and death. So do all of you become enlightened when one aspect of you does? No, you don't. But that aspect will return back to a place of connection and will then begin to assist those other fractured aspects, we will say, to return home. It's all about returning home. The truth of the matter is that you are a collective consciousness that creates one giant mind. And this is very, very difficult for you to truly comprehend in your separated state. But from our point of view, that is how we see it. We see you all as tiny sparks of a divine flame that just believe they are not part of the divine flame. And so our job when we connect with you is to try to get you to change your beliefs about that misinterpretation of your experience. And for those of you that are willing to act on faith, because when you do the lessons of A Course in Miracles, of course you are acting on faith. You are saying, well, someone thinks this is a good idea. I'm not particularly happy, so I'll give it a shot. That practice will begin to give you a different experience. And that is what starts you on the road to the reintegration of the fractured sonship. That is what you are. It's an illusory state. You are at home with God, but there's an aspect of you that believes you are not. So when you are enlightened, that becomes an absolute truth, a knowing, and you return to the heart of the divine, which is well worth the effort, we will say, because separation is a painful experience. You can see it in babies, for example, nestled at their mother's breast. If you take them away from that comfort, their arms will flail and they will cry and they will seek it again. That is very much what has happened to you, but it is self-induced. So when you suffer, ask yourself, what idol am I chasing? Am I chasing the idol of defensiveness? Am I chasing the idol of money? Am I chasing the idol of not enough time? Am I chasing the idol of perfecting the body through physical means? What is it that you are doing? What is it that you are sacrificing? What is it that you are not owning in yourself? Because once you begin to own your own mind, own your own decisions, own your own feelings, and interpret them correctly through studying the material that is coming through this being, you will see that you are making choices that are making you unhappy. And that is the end fork in the road. Which fork are you going to take? The one towards happiness or the one towards suffering? Each day you make these choices, but in unawareness. And it is in awareness through practicing the lessons of A Course in Miracles, of course, first doing them, then practicing them, that you will come to see where you are disempowered, confused, deluded, unsure of yourself, unhappy. So, we know that that is a long and rambling answer to that question, but we like to elaborate so that you do not get caught up in the parables too much as a literal description. We do our best to explain to you something that is can only be comprehended through experience. So we are trying to describe what it's like to swim in a warm tropical ocean when you've been hot all day with words. It cannot be done. You have to feel the joy of diving under the water and the relief of heat. You can see how that is indescribable in words. And so is awakening, so is enlightenment, so is oneness. You must experience it. But if you are seeking this experience diligently, there are many of us on this side that do our very best to grasp your hand and assist you in that journey home. We will speak to you again in a few minutes.
Wow. It's interesting. Yeah, I don't have much to say about that.
I was just thinking of you swimming in cold water.
Yeah, no, that's nice. I like that. Yeah.
I don't know. That last video you posted, you looked pretty reluctant to go under. And
yeah, it was very cold. So I could feel my feet getting really cold. So I was just like manning myself up a bit. And I jumped under. It was really beautiful there. Just in the middle of like a beautiful kind of sunset kind of thing. So it was amazing.
Nice.
It's really nice.
Yeah, I think for me, just over the years of doing the course and channeling, I think of other incarnations to the best of my ability as happening at the same time as this one. So if I'm getting a message about a past life, which I don't get very often, I've only had a couple, I try not to see them as, I use that word past because that we're just so used to talking about it in that way. But I see those, I imagine those beings living at the same time as me and me trying to help them with the issues that were shown to me. And also realizing that I can get negative experiences and positive experiences coming from those other incarnations as well. And we often feel those as a real intense interest in something, like a real intense interest in Egypt, for example, or art creation or whatever it is, that's coming from some of those places, because it hasn't really happened in this life. It's coming from something else. So I just try and honor it, but I try not to let it rule me to the best of my ability.
Yeah, I haven't had much of that. I just, yeah. I mean, yeah, I have kind of touched upon some kind of I think I've done Dolores Cannon's hypnosis thing.
Oh, right.
But what did I get out of it? I'm not sure. I just could see a life, and I could see I got hanged for preaching too much or something.
Oh, so, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And I think that's what I'm kind of learning in this life, is to not force my opinion too much to other people. And I think that's why I got into a family which they are kind of impinging their things on me a lot. So that's what I got.
That's what you're working on. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're working on our family issue stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I think that's that. That my past life there, which is not really past, which might be happening now, and that's why it's still an issue, right? So we're kind of working on it simultaneously. Yeah. So I'm kind of using the mirror, and that means probably in past life, but I just look at here now.
Yeah. Well, here now is enough, I think.
Yeah. I focus there. I'm a guy, single focus. That's all I can handle.
Okay. Let's see what our next question is.
Yeah. All right. This is an interesting one. I recently went to my Unity Spiritual Community program on more love, joy, and peace through grief. And during the time I shared my grief with the group, the facilitator, after asking my permission, put his hand on my chest and back, and I could literally feel something heavy leaving my body. I immediately felt lighter. What was happening, and how can we facilitate this process for ourselves, for all aspects of our health and well-being, with love and gratitude?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
Guys are so creative.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll bring Amanda through. We're with you again, dear ones. As usual, we want to thank all of you for dragging your bodies to these computers and tuning into this most wonderful shared experience. We love these conversations. We love the conversations that we're having with many of you in your imagination as you think it to be. In your dream time too, we spend time with all of you, working with you to open up the channels of communication. That is what we are about here. We are opening up the channels of communication. And this experience that this being had was one of the channels of communication that she was willing to have opened for her. So as teachers and guides and spiritual counselors, we look at every person's manifested thoughts, beliefs, and ideas, and we will say, where is there an opening for us to access this person in a loving way? So if you are a practitioner of Nazi beliefs, we will find a way to connect with you. If you are a Baptist churchgoer, we will find a way to connect with you. If you are a shamanic student going into a sweat lodge, we will find a way to connect with you. If you are a Course in Miracles student, we will find a way to connect with you. And we will use what you believe in to open up your mind to a greater reality within the parameters that will not frighten you. So these are the two pieces of bread that we make our sandwich from. You are in the middle. Your limiting beliefs are on one side, and your willingness is on the other side. So we must work with this combination. What are your fears? We won't trigger those. What are your, where are you open? We'll begin to access through that point. So when you have an experience, for example, in a church healing ceremony or a shamanic healing ceremony, we won't differentiate between the two because they are the same, a gathering of like-minded souls seeking some form of healing. Things can happen there that appear to be caused by that circumstance. And what humans generally do is they attribute that healing to the circumstance rather than the state of consciousness that they are holding going into that circumstance. So, for example, the person going to the Unity Church may not feel comfortable going to a shamanic healing, but they may have had the same experience had they been willing to go to a shamanic healing. So the error that is often precipitated by the way that human mind works is, oh, it must have something to do with this particular church or this particular person, when in fact what it was the human going to seek relief, to seek healing. Spirit worked through the passageway that was open to that consciousness. So this is why it's so important for all of you to be very open-minded about whatever path other beings take, because their consciousness and their beliefs and their limitations force them to only be able to access certain things at that time. So if you see somebody converting to a very, very strict religion, and you look at them and go, oh my goodness, how terrible, they're going to lose their freedoms. For them, that makes sense given the fears, the beliefs that they hold within their consciousness. And they will, through that experience, have the experience that they need to come to understand themselves more. And it may be that they get to experience their limited beliefs and ideas, their fears. They may get shut down and controlled by a system, and they may, through that experience, realize that that doesn't feel very good, and they may break free from it. And it is in that breaking free from it that they shake off their own limiting beliefs and ideas and fears. But if you had prevented them from going through that process, they would not have had that deep experience of their own minds, because that is what they're going to create. You're always creating a manifestation of your own mind. And that reflection, whether it feels good or bad, is what you use to decide, do I want more of this or not? Nobody can do it for you. You have your own free will. You have a multiplicity of erroneous ideas and beliefs that you take into every experience. And through manifesting things that you don't like, you begin to ask yourself, oh, I am the common denominator here. This has happened to me before, or this is continuing to happen to me. People have come and gone. I've lived in different countries. I've worn different clothes, but I'm having the same experience. I'm the common denominator. It's something I'm doing that is causing this. And that is a moment of realization that we all cheer on this side. We all cheer for you when you see that you're the common denominator, and it must be something that you are creating. Then comes the lesson of how do we create, and then spirit will begin. Once that realization has come, there must be a better way. This is a well-known phrase that humans say when spirit then becomes able to influence you more clearly. There must be a better way. Please help me find it. And that often comes from miscreating and having experiences that you don't like. But in that realization, I'm doing this, but there must be a better way. You open up your mind, you become teachable, you become willing to entertain a new idea. And guess what? Guess who will be there? Spirit will be there to give you that new idea, to introduce you to that new person, to work out synchronistically a meeting of some kind or some kind of connection where you might hear a different point of view. So as we say, we will work through whatever doorway you open for us. Some doorways are more direct, and that is really what the Course in Miracles is. It's a direct training program to connect you with your guides and teachers, your personal guidance from spirit, rather than going through a church or a healer or some other being. And we do ask always to never mistake this being for the teaching. She is a microphone. She is a channel. She is not the teaching, and she is very happy for us to remind you of that. She is just an ordinary human being who took the prescribed medicine that we are prescribing for you, and she kept utilizing that medicine in an appropriate way through practice, through assessing her decisions, good, bad, and indifferent. She definitely made some really tricky decisions throughout her Course in Miracles practice time, but she would look at them and own them and say, this is not working for me. How can I change this? And through a repetitive practice of asking that question, she began to experience a life that made her happier and happier and happier. And she continues to do that, and you all will continue to do that too. For some of you that have finished the lessons, you understand that suddenly everything is not all sweetness and light. In fact, often what happens when you have finished the lessons, which remember is a clarification process, we have always told you it's not path to enlightenment, it's a clarification process to remove the barriers to your ability to see clearly what you're doing. And so for many course students, once they've done the lessons, once they've started to understand the practice of forgiveness, they see more clearly where they are out of accord with love, where they are making choices that do not serve them. And so some might say that it gets worse before it gets better, but what you are doing is seeing how you are participating and miscreating, whereas before you took the lessons, it was everyone else's fault, or it was your boss's fault, or where you were living, or your job, whatever it was. After the lessons, you begin to see, look at me here, I'm just handing over my sovereignty to somebody else, or I'm very, very fearful about money. I didn't realize that I had these deep financial fears and attachments. Whatever it is becomes clearer. And in some ways, that's when the really hard work begins of experiencing your own creations and asking yourself, is this working for me? If not, how can I address this situation differently to have a different outcome? And as you connect more and more with your own personal guides and guidance, inner knowing, because that's how it will show up at first. It'll just be a knowing, I'm not doing this anymore. This is not working for me. Whereas 6 months before, you were just trying harder and harder to do the same thing that you've always done. So these penny dropping moments can be in a second, but they are built upon practice. So just as your fitness level increases as you practice your fitness program, so too does your spiritual awareness grow as you practice your forgiveness practice. So we would say to you, don't get caught up in that event as more special than any other person's healing event. It was a method that it was a doorway through which energy exchange happened. Now, when somebody of a low frequency encounters somebody of a higher frequency with a desire for healing, which means they want to increase their frequency, there can be an exchange between those two beings where that does happen. And a clarification can happen if the healer, now we're going to say that somebody temporarily has more awareness and a higher frequency than the other being. They're not more special. They've done a bit more work. They're further along the road. that being is able to use their energy body, which is more vibrant, more energized, more connected, more loving. They can use their energy system, because remember, your energy system comes way, way out of your body. They can detect a human energy system 20 feet out from the body. So you are mistaking yourself for this physicality, but you are much more. That loving, more awakened energy can impinge upon an energy system that is blocked and shut down. Because what is that person asking for? They're saying, help me, relieve me from my own mind, because that's what grief and suffering are. You are saying, I give you permission. My free will is in your hands. Help me raise my frequency. And so that is a possibility. If, however, you're very fearful of somebody, let's say, impinging upon your consciousness, you may say the words, but there might be a barrier within your true will, and it stops you being healed. And also, there are beings that are sick, but that have created a life around that sickness because they're afraid to have a fully expressed life. And when it comes to actually healing that sickness, there's a part of their mind that says, yeah, but if we get better, we're going to have to do this stuff. And they don't really want to do that stuff. That's one of the reasons they got sick, because they were afraid of the world, or they were afraid of getting educated or seeking some kind of self-expression. And it's a bigger issue for that mind than just getting better. There was an original fear that created the constriction that prevents them from living a full life. So they may have created an injury or some kind of autoimmune disease, for example, that is impinging upon their ability to be free. And a healer approaching them cannot affect them because they are not willing, truly not willing. They may be sick of being sick, but they have not yet come to comprehend what benefit they are getting from that said sickness. So we'll give you another example here. If somebody has been sexually assaulted, and many beings that are sexually assaulted will gain weight in your society so that they do not get sexually assaulted again, instead of owning their own power and knowing that that is not going to happen again because they've decided it's not going to happen again, they have taken a sort of passive aggressive path to allowing the weight that they are carrying to protect them from sexual attention. So instead of just eliminating the unwanted sexual attention and dealing with that issue, they have removed all potential for sexual expression from their life by making themselves overweight. And this is a very, very common problem, particularly for women in this society, and it is coming up a lot in North America regarding sexual abuse or predatory behavior in a patriarchal society. So you can see how we have to work within the limitations of your belief system. And that is why we ask you to work with the Course in Miracles lessons, because you are addressing your belief system, and that is always what is preventing you from having a more joyful, more happy and healthy life. So we hope that answers your question, and we will return shortly for more interesting discussions.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard that with weight, that's usually a protection thing. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, if you, I mean, it's been interesting. I don't know if the same thing is on the news in Europe, but it's very big here. The whole Harvey Weinstein and, 50 women coming forward saying that he was abusive to them.
Tina, I'm not watching the news.
No, I don't watch. No, I don't watch the news. It just happens. It's just like kidding. It's just coming through everywhere. But I just think of the the part of the book in Love and a Map to the Unaltered Soul, where Jesus was talking about the perpetrated victim creation in this society, how little boys are trained into war and battles and swords and overriding other people's boundaries. I'm gonna chop your head off.
Yeah.
Like, it's basically overriding someone's boundaries.
Yeah.
And girls are taught to be compliant. And I think it's just an interesting thing that we're all using our free will to say, yes, I'm going to follow those rules, even if we don't agree with them. So I just think it's an interesting thing, this idea that we follow rules that we don't agree with when we're unconscious. I think you even mentioned it when we were chatting just before, where you're like, you can watch yourself with your family and going, oh, wow, I used to do that. Now you're seeing some space between the action and the consciousness that is you now.
Yeah, I have to add some more to that. Yeah, I guess I could say it again. I mean, I've just noticed that there's a lot of eating, that's become a thing. And usually I'm very strict with what I'm eating, and I'm very diligent and stuff.
Yes.
Except for chocolate. But this time coming here, I've been just going full in, just cakes and whatever, and I'm just kind of gone in, doing it automatically, just to kind of observe what's happening. And it's almost like when I take the cake and when I'm saying, oh yeah, can I have some cake, and I just realize that everyone around the table is like, yeah, you take that cake. It's kind of like a weird thing happening.
There's a lot of approval coming.
Yes. It's so much stuff happening. It's insane. But I'm just observing it because I'm learning a lot actually from doing that.
Yes.
It doesn't mean I have to continue doing it, but I'm learning a lot.
But I think there's something about participating in, I know when I'll go to see my mum, and she has certain rituals that if she knows I'm coming, she will have a meal ready for me the second I walk in the door. She has no idea what I've eaten, never, and it's a hot meal, and I get sat at the table like straight away.
Yeah.
And I do the same thing. I'm observing it now. I mean, it's not that we're obsessing about food, but I think this is one of those places where we're so conditioned, and it's a challenge. I know Anna Gret has been on this amazing month-long vegan diet, and kudos to you. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I think it's one of these great ball and chains that we carry around with us, and so it's a really interesting arena. But the old Tina, before Course in Miracles, would get angry at my mum for trying to feed me when I didn't want food. And it would start off a negative thing. What I do now is I expect it. I know it's coming. I understand her conditioning. And so I find a way of lovingly, if I'm hungry, I'll eat it. If I'm not hungry, I'll just say, oh, that's okay, Mum, let's just put it aside. But there's no volatile reaction there. But that's taken quite a lot of practice and self-awareness in me. Because I used to blame my mum for, I would blame my mum for my eating problems. So through the practice of forgiveness with the Course, I've started to own that. Instead of blaming her for it, I just go, oh, this is just a dysfunctional system that's been passed down through my family. And I have my free will, and I must train my mind, and I must understand how I'm using it to soothe myself, but to go into it, that's what I usually do now when I'm with my mum. I go into her world of food and how she uses it as an education for myself. I say, this is the person who taught me. Let me observe what she's doing so that I can understand myself better, because she taught me that. I just don't remember her teaching me. So I think it's a really, unless eating that way really triggers tremendous negative physical or mental or emotional issues, it can be an interesting experiment for sure.
Yeah, that's what I feel like I'm doing this time. I feel like I'm going in with much more awareness, and I'm just almost like getting taken through that so that I can see what's happening, so that I can learn what's actually happening, and all the because I'm more aware. It's almost like I'm doing stuff without, without really being immersed in it. I'm just doing it, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Interesting. So there's like two conversations kind of thing.
Yeah. And I mean, you can have a piece of cake and your mum will come up behind you and stroke you on the head and tell you that she loves you, and you're like, no wonder I like cake. Oh, that's fascinating. Clearly, this happened to me a lot as a child. So I think it's a very interesting experience to go to your family.
You get a lot of love when you eat. That's for sure. It's like you get so much love and attention when you eat your food, and you're a good kid, and it's just all this kind of praise. It's crazy.
Okay, let's get up. Okay, let's go to our next question.
Okay. We could probably talk about this for weeks.
Oh, apparently, Ken, you and I share the cake issue.
I think we do. Okay. Dear Ananda and Jesus, as always, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us and for helping humanity as a whole. Special thank you, Tina, for all the wonderful work that you are doing. I would really appreciate if you could enlighten us on the situation in Africa, especially in Kenya, where I live. African countries in general seem to be having a difficult time, as there is a great deal of political turmoil and the threat of violence is constant. I understand that the old energies are clearing as Gaia moves to the next dimension. Still, it is difficult not to go into fear when we see constant upheaval in our country. Any advice you can share on how we can deal with these times here in Africa will be much appreciated. I think I'm the only one from Africa in this group, but still, it would be nice if my question would be answered. Much love and light. It's amazing.
Well, I actually have a very strong connection to Africa. I was there last December in West Africa, which was one of the more peaceful countries, but they had an election there when I was there, and the president that got voted out said, I'm not going. And he said, I'm not going. I don't care for this democracy thing. And it was an entire, half the country left in terror of some kind of retribution happening. So I wasn't there when that happened. I had just left, but I did have like a little bit of an experience of it, just sort of vicariously. And I saw what an intense country Africa is. Africa's not a country. The terrible thing to say. Africa's not a country. I was in one little country in West Africa. It doesn't matter if you're the only person in Africa. I'm interested in it, so we'll answer the question.
Yeah, I have an affinity for bongo drums, African drums. I love African.
Yeah, and I've always painted African animals, and it's been front and center in my life for a year or so. So there's definitely something going on with Africa. I've got friends who have just gone there on holiday too, and they have promised to take elephant photographs for me. So I'm quite excited about that. Cool. Okay, let's bring Jesus through and see what he has to say. The tensions that you are seeing around the world are exacerbated in that particular continent and in some of the countries in that particular continent because of the colonialism that has been in effect there for some time. Now, a lot of these countries have reverted to independent states, but they have foreign systems imposed upon their own tribal systems, and those foreign systems of occupation are still there, still active. And when countries seek independence from an oppressive regime, which is what colonialism was, generally speaking, they are in deep suffering. They are having a hard time making it economically. They do not like the system that's been imposed upon them. But this process usually has taken 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. The imposed system has been there long enough to do a lot of damage. And revolution can arise. This is often how these colonial systems are overthrown. And that is what you are witnessing in many African countries. You are witnessing economies that have been completely distorted by Western colonialism, whether it's the Portuguese, the French, the British, the Dutch. There are many, many white European societies that for several hundred years imposed their wants and desires upon the native people of those countries that weren't even countries. You must remember these lines on the maps that you see were imposed by these colonial systems. And so what you have are very much the same as the indigenous peoples of the Americas that had their culture beaten out of them, their resources taken from them. What were their resources in North America, for example? The land and the buffalo, the animals were slaughtered. Their way of life was taken from them. In Africa, you'll see a lot of countries that are having oil and minerals taken out of the ground using slave labor to do that. Now we are generalizing here, but in general, that is the state of a lot of countries in Africa. They are in a recovery process. They are like rebellious teenagers who have had rules imposed upon them by an overly strict parent. They have no idea what they're up to, but they know they want to be free. They are angry, they've been oppressed, they've had their countries raped and pillaged, and sometimes their peoples raped and pillaged. And there is a great deal of dysfunction going on. So this is the sort of general vibration, and there is a great healing coming to Africa. As there is a great healing coming to everywhere else, how do you stay out of fear? Well, you must pursue a spiritual practice, because if you stay in the physical material world as the place that provides you your safety, that you believe is necessary for you to be okay, then you will be in fear. And that is really a difficult challenge in these times for everyone. And this is one of the reasons that these teachings, of course, are coming through now, because you need assistance to keep reminding you not to look at the world as your source of safety and security, but to transform your mind into a place of love so that you bring into manifestation a place of love. Now, you can wish that those rules of creation were different all you want, but they are not. They are the way, that is the way that your world is created. It is created from within each of you. So when you have indigenous peoples that have been indoctrinated into a materialistic and oppressive governmental system that is unforgiving and unloving. All you have to do is look at some recent history of how the British or the colonial powers imposed apartheid rules, for example, in certain countries. These are extremely unloving ideas. But there are frequencies that are being reflected back to each of you. And no society is immune from creating their own reality. But what happens is that beings of a certain frequency will be incarnated, born into experiencing a society that is of a like frequency. So you may have a violent mind that was in another incarnation, a white European, that inflicted pain upon the indigenous peoples of a country, let's say that they were invading or that they were imposing political systems onto, that spirit now has left the physical body that was a white person, a non-African person, and has now manifested into an African person to make amends to that particular cultural group, but is coming in at the frequency that they left, which was violence, which was unlovingness. But that journey now is through experiencing violence and unlovingness and evolving, hopefully within that incarnation, into a more peaceful manifestation. So if you are living in a place that is increasingly violent and you are frightened, you have two choices. Well, you have many choices, but we'll name a couple of them. You can focus on your spiritual practice to bring love as much as you can into a situation that is lacking love. Or you can say, my frequency no longer matches this place, and I'm going to take my frequency to a place that feels better. You are never obligated to stay somewhere that does not feel right or safe or okay for you. Some beings in your society have no choice in terms of their ability to leave. They don't have enough money or a passport or the knowledge even that they can have a different experience. But you will see many, many beings in your world, let's say, that had been living in South Africa, that have chosen to leave that place because it no longer felt right to them. They were willing to go through the what is at times challenging process of emigration. What is emigration? Emigration is a person saying, this frequency of this place doesn't suit me and I'm okay with that. I'm going to go find a frequency that does. There is no right or wrong. It is not more evolved or less evolved to stay put or leave. You are a being of free will, creating your own reality. If you don't like what your reality is expressing to you, do what you can, what you are inspired to do to make that reality better. And for some beings, that is to leave a place that is no longer suiting them. Because after all, if you're born into a place and you do a bunch of spiritual work and you evolve into a higher frequency, it is logical to imagine that perhaps that place will no longer resonate with you. And that is what happened in the great migrations from Europe into North America, for example. The oppressive and controlling and religious persecution that was manifested in that time and place drove freedom-seeking, adventurous people to cross the oceans and arrive in another land. That was a great evolutionary leap for those beings to arrive on the shores of another country that was uncivilized, uncontaminated. Unfortunately, they brought a lot of those same ideas with them because they did not understand how the human mind and creation works. But you do now, you have access to this information. So what you want to do is to master your own mind so that you're not envisioning people breaking through your bedroom window at night killing you. That is imagination. If it's not happening, that's a sloppy thinking mind using its creative abilities inappropriately. So you, as someone living in that environment, must master your mind and not allow yourself to imagine the worst case scenario, because that is what you are going to be feeding your energy towards creating. That is how creation works. The collective or the majority or the energy of a group of people are focused on a particular thing. Now, it's not that you are focused on that happening, but you are focused on the frequency of that happening. And that is the same thing. You're holding the frequency of worry. So again, we've given that example of a parent sending their child off to a day trip, and worry is considered loving in your society, and it's not. It's very hateful. Imagining your child missing the bus or imagining something bad happening to your child is not loving at all. It's actually very unloving. And so that's what you want to do as a being living in that society. And there are people who get airlifted out of cities that are being occupied. It does not mean that they're weak or they're spiritually unevolved. It means that they're looking at their physical environment and saying, this does not look like it's going very well. Let me make a sound, intelligent decision here. This can be a place where spiritual practitioners can make some foolish decisions because they imagine that if they were evolved enough, they could overcome any situation. But what you have to look at is the reality, and we use that in inverted commas, yes, because it is only a reflection. It is not true reality. But when you are in an experience, you must look at what is, accept what is, and say, how am I having any fun here? Is this working for me? Is there something else that I think I should actually do rather than what I've been doing that has made this situation my experience? So use your intelligence, use your mind training skills, improve your mind training skills, make sure that you're not generating more fear in yourself than is necessary. And remember that the ego is designed to interpret the present physical situation that your physical body is in and decide whether or not it is dangerous, whether you're under physical threat of death. Your ego will always be trying to keep you alive. It is associated with the separated physical body. Now, this is the fundamental interpretation that you must always come to, whether you are living in a Western city or a remote ranch in Kenya. Am I under physical threat here? Do I need to do something about it? That is the basic function of the ego. And when the ego is triggered, you will feel fear and you will have that fight or flight reaction. And there are circumstances where that fight or flight reaction is necessary. So make sure whoever you are, wherever you are, is your physical being under threat? If it is, and you want to remain in good health, then make a logical decision based on what you are seeing. Do not override your ego in that kind of circumstance. And this is a very, very important thing because the egoic consciousness is hypervigilant, very fearful. And what we are teaching you here is not to denigrate the ego. We teach you how powerful it is. We teach you what it is up to. But in the end, your ego wants to keep you safe in the physical body. Now, ultimately, of course, there is the ultimate demonstration of mastery over the physical, but most of you are not there. So don't pretend to be masters over the physical when you're not masters over the physical. That is an experience that comes after many, many lifetimes of practice and diligent attention to love. So be realistic about where you are, be realistic about what's happening, and ask yourself, should I make a move here? Is that going to be the safest thing for me to do? Or is my imagination running away with me? Am I worrying about things that aren't happening? And would I be better served to discipline my mind and keep my eye on what's going on, but not go into a panic that's self-generated and causing more fear than is actually required for the situation? We will return shortly. Interesting.
I really like that they clarify that, because, and I also have to say that before I think I thought I was more spiritual than I was, and I think it's nice to get that reminder too.
Yeah, our lives show us where we haven't figured stuff out yet. And I thought it was interesting too, like they were talking before about the hurricanes in one of the channelings, and they said, you know, that there's being a lot of love expressed in those situations by people helping each other. I actually think it was someone else channeling. I can't remember now. It gets confusing. But they were saying that there were a lot of people in some of these places that got their homes devastated that were relieved that they didn't have to pay their mortgage anymore, that they were relieved that they didn't have to keep doing this life that they were tired of. So I think sometimes it's important for us that we don't know what's actually going on spiritually sometimes in what can look like a really negative situation. But I thought that was interesting what you said about it's almost like rebellious teenagers breaking free of a system that doesn't work.
Yeah, that makes sense. But of course, when you're there, it's
yeah. Oh no, totally.
It's not picnic. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I guess if your life's under threat, you have to make an assessment of, am I going to stay here, or am I going to?
Yeah.
Am I going to fight or flight?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Next question?
Yes, we'll do next.
Okay. Okay, so the next one. I had an experience where I had a glimpse of reality for 2 days. I have had the same clarity come and go many minutes and hours whenever I seem to listen to certain people who ask self-inquiry questions, especially people like Papa G. Shall I continue with your teaching or people of self-inquiry? I love your teaching and feel it's undeniable truth, but having experienced how easy self-realization can be, I feel like I'm wasting my time reading A Course in Miracles. No disrespect, but am I? Question mark. Like he's wondering about that. Can you also elaborate on what's going on inside those of us who keep getting glimpses and why it come and goes? Much love. It's a really good question. I really like that question. Yeah.
Oh. No, we're with you again, dear ones. We want to tell you that there are, as we said in the last answer, there are varying doorways in each of your minds based on your experiences, your teachings so far, your beliefs, your age, your cultural affiliations, the education you've been through, the family, the culture your family was raised in. There are an infinite number of variables that will create particular openings in your consciousness for information to go through. And we, of course, are promoting A Course in Miracles for a particular group of people, and the particular group of people that it is for are the people that are drawn to it. Those of you that are not drawn to it, that hate it, that prefer to go to a sweat lodge and do some drumming, and that is the way that your belief system, the structure of your consciousness, opens up to spirit. So we want you to know that there is no one path to awakening. There are faster paths to awakening. There are slower paths to awakening. There are paths that claim to take you to awakening that will not take you to awakening. And so it is up to you. You are free beings. And if you have an experience that comes through a particular practice, continue that practice if you enjoy it and it brings you what you want. If another practice causes you to feel negativity or shame or guilt or difficulty, feel free to put that practice down. So yes, we are saying if one practice that you have found works for you, you were drawn to it for a reason, you were guided to it for a reason. It does not mean that you are not having communication that has arisen from this practice. And sometimes that is how it goes. You will have the clarification of the lessons of A Course in Miracles, and then you will be guided to have new experiences that have nothing to do, seemingly, with A Course in Miracles. However, the inspiration, the clarity, the ability to interpret that inspiration may very well have come from doing the lessons of A Course in Miracles. It may have been that clarification process that cleared away some of the lenses that distorted your vision to allow you to align with a different process. So it is very much like, we will say, 12-step programs. 12-step programs are designed to stop you from abusing yourself with substances or actions. What the 12-step program eventually does is take you to your own unique connection to the divine through a personal spiritual practice. But the first few years of that experience are designed to stop the suffering, to stop the addiction, to stop the abuse. And then you go into a recovery period where you are undoing the damage that the distorted thinking and behavior created, and eventually you will come to peace, and your own spiritual path will be revealed to you once you have come to a place of peace. So if you are having these kinds of experiences, then go for it. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You're free to practice many different modalities if you feel so inclined. But if you don't feel so inclined, try something else. We are here to encourage you to do the lessons. Why? Because it is one of the fastest ways to bring the mind to a state of self-awareness and connection to guides and teachers in this time and place. Some beings have done enough work that other pathways have been opened up to them, but that may very well be because they have done years of other kinds of work apart from A Course in Miracles lessons. So it is not the only way. It is the way for those of you that align with it, that are drawn to it, that get positive results from it, that enjoy it. Our dear one followed this path because it worked for her, and it was her language, and it was her destiny to teach this particular work. There are those of you that do not feel that way, and that is okay. There will be another doorway into your mind. Every person will encounter many, many different spiritual opportunities in their life. You may get taken to a church by a friend or a partner. You may pick up a book. You may encounter someone who's a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon or a born-again Christian, and you may have a conversation with them. And each one of those are potential doorways into experiencing a different kind of spiritual practice. Some of you will be drawn to go through those doorways for a while or for the rest of your incarnation. Some of you will say, that's not for me. I don't like the look of that. I don't like the feel of that. And that is okay. It does not mean that it's not valid for those beings that are following it. Again, we want you to be very forgiving about everything that you encounter. That means that if you see that something is right for you, follow it. Your guidance system is unique to you. Your feedback is unique to you. Your beliefs, your blocks, your limitations, your fears, your difficulties are unique to you. Your conditioning is unique to you. And so that doorway through your consciousness may very well be what suits you. We hold firm in the knowledge that the 365 days of the lessons of A Course in Miracles will take you to a particular experience. But if your mind is unwilling, if your mind is argumentative, if your mind is resistant to those lessons, then they won't work as well as for those beings that are open and willing and dedicated to that practice. Just as there are beings that find awakening through a dedicated yogic practice, for example, doing physical moves combined with mental discipline, that may be the path for those beings, and that is good and as it should be. So don't belabor it. If you're having wonderful results with that particular form of mind mastery, it is not that different in that sense. You are in self-inquiry, you are questioning your thoughts. You are saying, is this true? How do I know that it's true? How am I without that thought? It is not that different from A Course in Miracles practice in that sense. The lessons of A Course in Miracles are saying, have this thought instead of the ones that you have. And self-inquiry is really saying, how am I without that thought? It is merely not replacing that thought with an assertive, proactive insertion of a new idea. So that is really the only difference. They are different in, not really in kind, but in degree, we will say. So allow yourself that journey, allow yourself the experience, and allow other people their experience. And all of you that question what you're doing, or if you are struggling with A Course in Miracles, allow yourself to venture off to other experiences in combination with your course studies. Course studies are a self-study program, and you are gregarious social creatures. So if you fancy going to a trance music concert, have a go. If you're attracted to it and curious, and there's some positive draw to it, there's something there for you. It may be that you go and say, wow, this is not for me. I don't like this. You've eliminated something. You have got more focus. If you are intrigued and want to go to a retreat in some tropical country where you do yoga on the beach, and you decide to do that, you don't have to give up A Course in Miracles to do that. You don't have to compare and contrast and say, well, I'd rather do yoga on the beach than A Course in Miracles. Of course you would rather do yoga on the beach than A Course in Miracles. But doing yoga on the beach every day often is not feasible. So A Course in Miracles is a practice that you can take with you to work. You can take it with you on holiday. You can do it no matter how much money you have or don't have. You can do it no matter how physical or not physical you are in your abilities. You can do it regardless of many other variables that other practices can limit you in. So add it to what you are interested in. Add it to what brings you joy. Add it to whatever it is that you are already doing or that you're curious about, and know that it does not impinge upon anything. It will only ever make the other things that you're doing more enjoyable, more peaceful, more loving, more generous in all ways. So we are encouraging you to step up your game yet again. We know that there are some of you in this group that have in recent days been very, very focused in your practice. And we would like to throw down that gauntlet for all of you. We would say to you, over the next few days, really focus on appreciating what amazing experiences you are having, appreciating the lessons that you are being shown, appreciating the fact that you know the world is a reflection and not an absolute, that when you change your mind, you can change that reflection. We want you to focus on accepting what is for now with a curious mind, asking yourself, what is this showing me about what I'm doing? Instead of resisting what is or judging what is, ask yourself, what is it revealing to me about what I'm doing? And if you are still watching television, we say turn your televisions off. Spend more time outside. Lay on this beautiful planet of yours, and if it's wet and cold, sit on a rock and get a wet bottom. You won't die. But earth yourself, ground yourself into this planet, connect with her, and say, I am coming on this ride with you from 3D up into 5D, through the heart, through love, which is 4D. And I want to be upgraded. I want to hold the frequency that you're holding as you're expanding and increasing your frequency. Align me with your frequency so that I can join you on this amazing experience that we are all having here. Really practice what we have given you as techniques to upgrade yourself. Some of you have done some amazing work this month, whether it is in mental focus or shifting and changing your diet or stepping away from old habits. And we want you to know that every time you step out of an old routine that was indoctrinated into you in the past, you open up exponentially to new experiences, to new ideas, to new healings, to new manifestations. So it is a multi-faceted, multi-dimensional mind in which you find yourself. And as you break out of these old habits, you will have access to more and more and more. And as you access more, you will know that it is because you have changed. It is not because the world has changed. It is because you have changed. We will speak to you again soon.
Wow.
That's you, Annegret.
Yeah.
And I was also getting Camilla. That was Camilla's. I had read a couple of Camilla's things, but it's very interesting. Sometimes when they're speaking, I get the image of the person that they're talking about.
Ah.
And I don't know who else is doing it, but.
Interesting. Are we doing another question? I guess it's...
No, it's
no.
12:30.
Yeah, I guess they usually round up with like, thank you very much and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's quite fast. Yeah.
It always goes so quickly.
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you very much, Tina.
Oh, yeah. Whew. That's a lot of words.
Yeah. How does your throat feel nowadays? Is it much stronger? Or
How does what?
Your throat? Your throat
Oh,
chakra?
well, I'm channeling every day. I'm usually doing a couple of hours of channeling every day in one form or another. So I'm good for a couple of hours.
Cool.
So I don't think we have any announcements, do we? We'll do a session in 2 weeks, as far as I know. That will.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that will go good. Yeah.
And I do think there are a couple of people who didn't get emails, but they did get sent out. So I think that people just need to maybe. I know spam can get very, very full very quickly, so it could have come in, quite a few emails beneath the top of your spam.
I just know that the ones that were talked about in the chat room was quite natural explanations, I think, for.
Yes.
So there was no specific thing. So, but if anyone has anything, of course, just type us an email at the support page. So channelingjesus.com/support. And then we just, ask your question or the problem, and then we will get on it.
Okay. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye-bye.